This episode is brought to you by Valora. Valora is a self-custody, mobile-first wallet and the easiest way to send, swap, collect, and purchase digital goods on the Celo blockchain. Download the app and start exploring today at valoraapp.com/empire. We have Santiago the skier back with us. Santi is debating whether or not to be a professional investor, a professional podcaster, or of recent a professional skier. So Santi, good to have you back with us.
Well, it's like what they say, right? If you're a triathlete, you're never good at any of the three disciplines. You're just kind of meh in all three. So I am having an identity crisis. I know I'm not a good skier. I know I'm a terrible investor. And as far as podcasting goes, well, it really does hang in the balance, and it will depend on the YouTube comments. So, folks, please guide me in the right direction, and I will. I'll make a life choice here.
Have you, Santi? Do you watch The Office?
Oh, I love The Office. The Office, and I started watching Modern Family, which is also much like The Office. So, anyways, yeah, I love The Office.
Yeah, Modern Family's good. So I'm watching The Office actually for the first time because basically half of the things that Mike says are references from The Office, and I'm on season 9, which I think is the last season. And Andy, so they basically just released the trailer for the Office show, and all the people in the office are watching it, and Andy is reading the YouTube comments, and he's like, there's one commenter who's like, Andy, you're bad at playing the banjo. And I'm like, oh my God, that's Santi and me. We get like 200 nice comments on YouTube, and then we're like, who is this guy? Yeah. Tree
there was one
447 saying that we don't know what we're talking about.
Shout out to all the people that keep us grounded and honest about this. There are a few that have hit home, and as they say, if it really hits home, then you got to work on it. And someone, I think, in the very early days of Empire saying, God, this guy really rambles. And I think it was a Terra episode, actually. It's like, Santi should just let Doe talk a lot. And I was like, well, I don't know if this is a Terra lunatic or I'm wrong. And I do think that I ramble still, but I made a point not to ramble as much. So anyways, thank you.
I remember that. I remember that app. Yeah.
I called you on a Sunday having an identity
housekeeping
crisis.
Exactly.
So it's real.
I'd be lying if I said I didn't do the same with you at some point. So yeah. All right, we got to do some housekeeping. One is big shout out to just everyone who listens. We had a record quarter in Q1 for listens and for downloads. Record March as well, just biggest month ever for Empire. So big shout out to everyone who listens. We have decided to move the show to Tuesdays instead of Mondays. So the guest episodes are going to come out on Tuesdays now instead of Mondays. Small switch, but if you noticed, the last 2 episodes, guest episodes with Kane and with Rob Lushner, both came out on Tuesday. We're going to keep that moving forward. We found that folks like that more. Other updates is we have some new permissionless speakers. Permissionless keeps prices go up every 2 weeks. Get your permissionless ticket if you haven't already. I feel like I'm forgetting some stuff, but I think that's good for this week. So It's NFT NYC. It's booming in New York. It's 80 and sunny this week. My Aura ring says it's the worst sleep I've gotten in like 6 months apparently. So
well, I thought it's because of the crisis and the fighting around Ethereum unlocking. But tell me more about NFT NYC. I heard you post that it was booming, and I was like, and you said what bear market? And my question to you was, well, if it's booming, is it really a bear market? Have we really been in a bear market in the NFT land? So, tell us more about how that went.
Yeah, I think it's booming in the sense that, I went to a bunch of good events, went to an Arbitrum event last night. There's like an Andreessen Horowitz hosted a good event. Collab Currency did a good event. We did something with OpenSea and Doodles on Tuesday night.
Okay. Who's like attending this conference? Would you say it's like a lot of artists, a lot of NFT? Like, are you seeing the Bored Ape kind of contingency?
So that's the interesting thing is like, no, honestly, Santi, there's no NFT talk. And like, I'm a little biased because I'm not that deep in the like NFT crowd, but I would say there's no NFT talk. There's like no NFTs on the walls. I haven't seen one NFT in all of NFT NYC. There's no NFTs on the walls. Haven't seen one person wearing a Bored Ape sweatshirt or a hoodie.
Oh, wow.
Honestly, it's just a lot of talk about like L2s, MEV, scaling, what's going on with Solana and Cosmos. Can they compete with ETH? People are talking about
Is it chatter now
Shapella.
around
Yeah.
other use cases of NFTs, or is it just purely?
Yeah, actually there is. Yeah. I had some really interesting conversations with folks yesterday about like some big fashion houses. Met some folks from, I think they're probably the biggest fashion house in the world. They're really, really excited about NFTs and like digital fashion. They kind of
Mhm.
painted this picture of a world where, every website where you'll go to everything from like Nike to Gucci to Louis, and you'll go on the website and there'll be a digital section.
Yeah,
And had like
yeah,
a
yeah.
really interesting conversation with them. And when you basically hit the website, like this is the world that they envision: is you go to the Nike website and there's a digital section,
Mm.
or there's kind of two versions of this. One is you go to the Nike website, there's no digital section. All you have is like the normal Nike store. You buy your Jordan, you log in with your MetaMask, or
Mhm.
with your crypto wallet. You buy your Jordans, and then when you check out, Nike actually just airdrops you a digital pair of those Jordans. So
Yeah,
that's like, and
exactly.
then you can take those Jordans and wear them in whatever, like, game that's
Hmm.
built on crypto rails. You can take them into the game. So that's like version one. Version two that they're excited about is you actually people end up spending more money on their digital self than they do their physical self. And that's the
Oh,
world I think a lot of them are betting on, is that,
yeah.
if you probably talk to you, or probably I'm in this bucket too. Like I'm, I'm probably not someone who's going to spend more on my digital self than actually, honestly, maybe I'm
I
wrong there.
mean, yeah, I
But
was gonna
anyways, but
say.
like they're betting on a world where you go to Louis' website and there's like, or Gucci's website, and you've got your like normal Gucci store, and then you click the digital section, and there's like just digital goods that you can purchase. So
Yeah. I mean, this was my thesis early on. Like, I fundamentally think that like when I was at Parify, we obviously were big on DeFi, but then my definition of DeFi is like you're transferring value, and an NFT is a transfer of value. And so I sort of bucket that. I mean, of course, you could talk about non-art use cases for NFTs, insurance contracts, real estate, property like being tokenized and represented as an NFT. Um, but I think that's like real world assets, all that stuff. Like, but just that use case that you just described, I think will be probably the biggest that in the next like 2 years, that is probably the use case that is the killer use case for NFTs. You already, and I haven't seen when you talk about throughout this bear market, we've seen like, Tiffany roll out for, a special kind of edition for punks. You've seen other like Adidas collaborate with G Money, which is like a, prominent NFT figure. Um, there's a number of like we had, of course, that episode with Camila, and one of her coworkers or colleagues talk about how brands are thinking about NFTs. And the question that we asked them was, hey, is all this like implosion of, FTX and Terra and regulatory stuff really holding these brands back? And I think what I heard was, no, not really. I mean, they've been on this journey for a long time. I think marketers really realize the bullish case for NFTs is people are spending more time online, and they want to, when you think about it, you open your wardrobe, you see a lot of stuff. You open your digital wardrobe, there's not much there. And the reason there's not much there is because you couldn't have digital property. And just to kind of close the loop out is this has been my approach. I spent the last week with there's a few execs in the beverage industry, especially from Coke. And I said, guys, envision this world. And he actually ran marketing for all of Coke for a number of years. And I pitched them on NFTs. He's already retired. And I said, do you not see this world? And then I kind of explained the flow. QR code. I'm in a stadium. You give me a particular image of Coke and of the World Cup or a particular event, and then you know everything about that consumer. And of course, it's just like, whoa. He's like, well, what about privacy? And I said, yeah, that's, I think, the elephant in the room, privacy.
yeah, yeah,
But I think it's
yeah. I
going to
mean,
come much faster than most people appreciate. Like I'm waiting for that huge marketing convention when all these people all of a sudden say, oh, wow, like Nike's doing it. And if you're Adidas, you're at a huge disadvantage all of a sudden. And then it just,
yeah,
really spirals
exactly.
from there. Anyway.
Exactly. I mean, I would say the two things that people are talking about with NFTs are this week, or at least the folks I've been meeting, which is probably, sample size, very small sample size, is much less JPEG conversation and much more digital fashion, and then like loyalty programs, I would say. Those are the two, like basically just the ability to have a loyalty program that
Mhm.
not just like kind of tracks you around like what your activity is, but actually your financial activity now for the first time. So that's
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's what people are excited about. So I mean, people aren't talking about JPEGs because the price of doodles is like 2.7 ETH right now. Like they're just
Yeah.
not ripping. So
That's the other thing that you mentioned just now, which I think is so true. Um, when we think about the use, we're going to talk about ETH, obviously. This has been kind of, when you think about, there's not been a lot of news recently, but ETH is kind of front and center. And I think fundamentally, when you think about NFTs, most of them are denominated in ETH terms. And it's interesting from a psychological perspective, from a consumer standpoint. It's very different to tell someone, hey, spend 1,000 to, 1 ETH on, or 0.25 ETH on something versus, oh, just drop, 200 bucks, 300 bucks. It's like when you think in ETH terms, it's not as, it's not as like, it's easier to win the argument, right? When you think about like, oh, buy this NFT that's going to give you access to a game that's going to launch in 2 years. For that same price of that mint, you could go out and buy a PlayStation 4 or what is it? PlayStation 5. But most people don't think like the psychology around that is interesting. And so it further reinforces kind of the use case of you holding ETH, using ETH. You remember way back in the day in like 2017, the arguments around the the velocity, like what is it? MV equals PQ, kind of like how we think about like the sustainability of token prices. And, velocity was a huge component around that. Underlying that is there any reason for people once they earn something to hold on to it? And ETH, I think, just I understand Bitcoin for all the crowd that's listening right now. Bitcoin has ripped 100% now since the bottom. Ethereum has lagged; it's up like 65, 70%. A lot of it is macro inflation related, and I believe. Um, but long term, if you kind of like zoom out and say what really drives value, I think is utility, not scarcity. And I think that will probably be the biggest thing that some people may have gotten wrong in investing in this asset class, where you're so focused on scarcity because that's the meme. That's what we think about when we think about gold and value and some collectibles and whatnot. But by and large, that's like a small subset of the world's, I think, economy. Most of the value in the stock market or companies that just provide incredible value. And
yeah.
I see that happening more on Ethereum probabilistically than any other kind of layer one, if you will, as a settlement layer.
Yeah. So let's talk about ETH.
Let's talk about ETH.
By the way, MV equals PQ. Haven't heard that. Was that a Bernisky 2017 valuation reference right there?
Him and Chris Peffer from XKKR guy
No,
too.
John Pfeffer, right?
John
Yeah,
Peffer, yeah.
yeah. I remember that
Yeah.
like big old PDF. I
Oh, yeah.
remember when I was working at the venture firm. I was like, look, guys, crypto is a real thing. There's this guy, and he wrote a PDF about this, and it's the institutional investors' take on crypto assets. Didn't help very much.
I mean, I thought
got
it
laughed
helped.
out of the room.
I thought it helped a lot. At least I could tell you that was most people have read that in Wall Street than the Bitcoin white paper.
Yeah, that's true. All right, let's talk about Shapella, huh?
Let's do it. Do you want to walk us through it?
Yeah. Let's just start by saying, Kamikaze, I'm sorry if you're listening to this. It seems that you were not right about this one, my friend, but better luck next time. So the the TLDR here is that so Shapella is just kind of collectively mashed together two words, Shanghai and Capella upgrades. Basically what it does is it enables unstaking for the first time since ETH staking was introduced in December of 2020. So if you remember, the Ethereum merge from a little bit ago transitioned the network from proof of work to proof of stake. And that happened about 6 months ago in September 2020. But for the last 6 months, users still weren't able to unstake their ETH. The validators had been able to do things, but there was really no mechanism by which previously staked ETH could be withdrawn. So this Shapella upgrade was what it did is it like officially transitioned us to proof of stake, and it enabled this kind of end-to-end unstaking flow. And so like yesterday, what happened is, I think a month ago, we completed the Gurley public testnet upgrade. And this was kind of like the last month, like the final trial before enabling unstaking on mainnet. And the big FUD, and the reason I was giving Kamikaze some shit there is because the the bear case on ETH was that there was going to be this huge unstaking event, and it was going to be a big
Mhm.
liquidity event, and a large portion of people were going to unstake their ETH, and those people, have been
And
locked
this,
up
and
for
this,
like a
by the
year and a
way,
half, and
just to put numbers on this, is like roughly 50% of all ETH is staked, right? And so, that translated into, if ETH has a market cap to 40 billion right now, that was what, 30 billion, 35, 36 billion that was potentially up for, had to be absorbed in the market somehow.
yep, yeah. So
I mean, assuming everyone withdrew super quickly, which was not going to be like the case, right? But anyways,
yeah.
in a worst
Well, there's
case.
a staking queue, and we can talk about that. And
Yeah, yeah.
I'm giving Kamikaze some shit, but like we should actually honestly see how
Hmm.
this week and probably a little bit early into next week plays out.
Yeah.
I don't want to dance on any graves yet, because there's still a little time because there's this staking queue. But like I think, yeah, big summary is like massive success. I remember in 2017, people were talking about how proof of stake was coming maybe that year or maybe in 2018. Obviously, it took a little longer than expected, but uh, yeah, just huge. I mean, proof of stake is finally complete on Ethereum. Massive congrats to everyone who worked on this. If you remember the merge, I remember sitting on Twitter being like, is this going to work? Like, is this technically going to go through? And I think it's a huge testament to everyone who works on Ethereum that, I don't know, this kind of just felt like a nothing burger event. Like it felt
Hmm.
like, I don't know, I wasn't really like sitting on Twitter waiting for it to happen. Not many like threaders posting about it. Like kind of it felt like a small news event, even though it's so big. And I think that's a big testament to the trust that we all have in the Ethereum developer community. And then on the asset side, like, yeah, it turned out to be a big, this, whole ETH Shapella dump FUD was just a big nothing burger. And
Hmm.
it turns out that now that staking works, people actually want to probably stake more ETH. It doesn't mean that they want to sell all their lock stake ETH. So I don't know, just a
Yeah.
huge 10. I would call this a big 10 out of 10 success for
Hmm.
Ethereum.
Definitely de-risk from a technical standpoint. Point number one, it really closes the loop on transition to proof of stake when you can easily uh, stake and withdraw. So that's point number one. Point number two, I think the biggest validator in the queue right now is Kraken. People should remember that Kraken has to do this for regulatory reasons. I believe they settled with the SEC recently around their staking program. It may be related to this. I believe. Now, someone from Kraken can correct me here, but I sort of think that that's the case. Um, and and so, as it turns out, not every, it's a very small percentage of validators that are actually in the queue to withdraw. Kraken being the biggest one. It's like 5, 6%, I believe, in the latest dashboard I saw. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I think there was a huge, people should remember way back the discount that the staked ETH derivatives had relative to the underlying ETH. And this was a big part of the kind of the duration mismatch, right? The liquidity discounts, as you think about, um, you had to lock up your ETH and it was very uncertain when this particular upgrade would happen. And so naturally the staked ETH derivatives would have, some sort of discount, right? Because you're locking it up. And now it's sort of, I think the you could in one scenario, which I think is the more likely one is that you're going to see a higher percentage of ETH being staked. And so I think it will be interesting to observe that number combined with what the ETH staking reward rate is, to become
Yeah.
quite interesting. I remember back in the day, when people think about how new institutions have started to come into the asset class. This was like before the whole kind of bear market started. I started to notice a very meaningful shift in players coming into the space saying, I don't want to even, there were calls that I wouldn't even talk about Bitcoin. It was just like, tell me about Ethereum. These are tech focused firms, a lot of hedge funds, like the Tigers of the world, sovereign wealth funds, saying it's interesting. Like, tell me more about it. We believe in this kind of being the settlement layer of the internet. The staking rate is super interesting. And they were spending a lot of time around the usability of ETH as an asset that could be basically kind of like paying these dividends, right? And like it's an asset that you can compound, right? Your staking rewards and do some interesting stuff with your staking rewards. And so, yeah, I think the biggest things that I'm looking at is, of course, as you said, over the next couple of weeks, how do the withdrawal queue kind of, um, happen? Like, how does that evolve? And are people restaking? the shift from centralized staking players to perhaps decentralized options like Lido and Rocket Pool and some of the other players, and what that does to the staking rate, the yield,
Yeah.
right? And so I think those are kind of the things that I'm looking at. But nonetheless, I mean, huge success from a technical standpoint, and and we'll see what I guess now the question is, what are people going to flat next on Ethereum? Because it's coming, so we'll see.
um, agree with all of that. I think one small correction is that I don't think Kraken is actually the biggest
Hmm?
ETH depositor right
Maybe
now.
not
I think it's
anymore.
actually Celsius. No, I think it's actually
Oh,
Celsius, by the way.
okay, maybe
It's
Celsius.
there's I think the 0x triple E. I'm looking at the wallets right now, just in the
Uh-huh.
queue, and there's this one 0x triple E. I'm pretty sure that's a Celsius address
Yeah, maybe.
with like
I'm not surprised.
400,000 ETH.
I was looking at that when I went
Yeah.
to sleep, and then I woke up, and it may have been updated. But Kraken was in the queue, and
Yeah,
it's
or 400
I think
million
it.
ETH. I meant, but yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean,
yeah.
here's the other side of what we're saying is the the price not dumping. The price was never going to dump right immediately after Shanghai. Um, there the 1.1 million rewards unlock over like 5 or 6 days, I think it is, and then the withdrawal queue is pretty limited right now. So I think people before dancing and celebration, I think it's we should probably give it a couple days, but yeah, I mean if we've got to the end of the weekend and there's no dump, then I think it's a pretty successful nothing burger event.
Yeah, yeah. It's always, again, it's sort of a interesting point because you always wonder, like, is your thesis right when you're investing? Is your thesis right? But then is your timing right? Or what do you know that the market doesn't know? And so it's like it's fairly interesting. I never try to do anything around these events, candidly, because it's kind of really, really hard to understand. Maybe all this kind of, it was already priced in.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people in crypto who were like early in crypto got used to news like this actually not being priced in. But the more that crypto develops, the more that news
Yeah.
like this is priced in. And I think we're seeing that this news was probably priced in. And also maybe my left bell curve take would just be that yeah, like when in doubt, go to the left bell curve and left side of the bell curve. And like the left bell curve take here was that if anyone is staking ETH, you probably really like ETH, and
Yeah.
you're probably like a big ETH head, and like you're not gonna sell. Why would you sell your ETH right now? So
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing
yeah,
another KPI, and we'll probably should link to a few nice dashboards that we've been looking at, but, um, on the unstaking component, it's sort of like it's a skimming process. So it's sort of determined by the Ethereum network. So they're not all immediately available. Because you could make the argument, if you're a big ETH holder, there are perhaps some strategies here that you're going to just stake your ETH. You're you're going to hold on to the underlying, but you're going to be selling the rewards. So, um, because I think depending on your jurisdiction, but my understanding is there's a recent change in the IRS ruling around staking rewards and how those are going to be treated from a tax perspective. So if you could envision a scenario where, if you're a big institution or whale or even normal retail, you're staking, you're not selling your ETH, but you need to cover a tax liability at some point on the rewards themselves, right? And so that may, over time
yeah,
have some selling pressure on the reward itself, right? Some people might want to do arbitrage strategies where they're hedging ETH and just capturing the reward. And, this is no kind of dissimilar between the GBTC kind of arb trade, right? And so I'm sure there's a whole bunch of strategies that have come around, a whole other set of derivative products around staking rewards that are going to probably crop up. The first one being
yeah,
stake Thesis is just the first vanilla one, but there's so many others that I think over the next couple of years we'll develop.
yeah. By the way, on the tax side of things, I'm pretty sure the way it works is that the asset in like the value the asset price going up is taxed as capital gains, and then the income that gets spit off from staking is
Hmm.
taxes income. I think that's how it
Yeah,
works.
yeah, income, I believe. We were actually
As
a big
income,
part
right?
of,
Yeah.
this was something that we spent so much time, back in 2018. And then that team ended up going out. That the lawyer that I was working with, Evan, ended up going to Bison Trails and Coinbase. But that was a formation of the Proof of Stake Alliance, and we hired this great professor from I think UVA that was a tax authority on the matter to like really just kind of craft some tax policy around it. But I think there's been still not very clear. I don't know. But anyways,
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Looking ahead. So
yeah.
Shapella is live on the network. Withdrawals are being processed. Uh, next major feature, I think, is EIP 4844, right? As part of the Denkun network upgrade, which is hopefully a 2023 thing. And what this does is it increases the scalability of rollups on Ethereum. So excited for that to come out too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Anything else on the Ethereum front that we should be covering?
Mm, no, I don't think so.
Yeah. We'll keep
I
everyone
think that's
posted,
good.
and I
Hey,
think
so we have
just
a
go ahead.
yeah. We'll link to there's a I think the best dashboard. There's this Metrica dashboard. We'll link it in the show notes. Valora is the ultimate wallet for exploring the Celo ecosystem. Easily manage over 50 crypto assets and over 30 different dApps for swapping, sending, and managing your assets, all from your mobile phone. The world is mobile first, and Valora believes that crypto should be too. Their global app is localized in over 13 different languages in over 100 countries, giving crypto explorers like you a simple and accessible way to send payments, purchase digital goods, and access a suite of decentralized financial services. You can access over 30 different dApps, all from your mobile phone. One of those dApps is HaloFi. More than 15,000 people are using HaloFi right now to save millions in crypto through custom saving challenges. Go to HaloFi, you can earn badges, mint NFTs, and maximize your savings with HaloFi. It's super cool. To check it out, download the app and start exploring at valoraapp.com/empire. That's Valora, VALORA, app, APP, valoraapp.com/empire. I think we have the Multicoin episode coming out on Tuesday with Kyle and Tushar. So this was the first time that they spoke publicly about just like FTX blowing up, Solana getting hammered. Their fund got crushed pretty hard. I know you were one of the first investors in the Multicoin. I don't know, Fund 1 or Fund 2 back in 2018 or 2019.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've known those guys for a long time. They're troopers. They're smart, good contrarian investors. Any takeaways from that podcast?
Yeah, I'll tell just a story of my relationship with Multicoin. I reached out to Kyle when I started reading his blog posts. At the time I didn't agree with everything. And then I met his partner Tushar. And look, for me, I was investing even at the time heavily in the space, and so there's no real reason for me to kind of invest with a manager unless I believe. And my thesis for these guys was these guys are probably going to capture something that I don't, right? And as an investor, you don't want to miss major trends. And lo and behold, I think they were very right on Solana. And it took a while for that thesis to play out. You could argue that, as much as there's been huge price fluctuations in all of crypto and their fund, is down perhaps for some LPs, but that's what I liked about them. And I think there's always like this thing that I've wondered, not just Multicoin specifically, and we touched on this in the episode, is people talk about being a contrarian investor. And I think Tushar said it very well, which is, as a contrarian investor, being a contrarian for the sake of being a contrarian makes absolutely no sense because you make no money, generally speaking, usually. Unless you're right, of course. But you need to be a contrarian and also just fundamentally think, what am I seeing? What do I know that other people don't? It's like sort of the Peter Thiel construct, which is, what is non-consensus today, which makes you a contrarian, but then you will be consensus over some period of time. And I say some period of time because that really also matters a lot in this space, particularly in this space, because you're structured as a hedge fund and your LPs might not be as patient, right? At the end of the day, a fund has some sort of life cycle, right? And if you could be right about a thesis in 200 years, but no one cares, you can be dead, right? So as Mark, as Key said, was it Keynes that said, you could stay, the market could stay irrational more than you could stay solvent or something like this. So nonetheless, no, I think it's a great episode. Look, those guys have Like it's not easy to be a fund manager, especially in crypto with all the volatility. And you could deliver great returns, and then it's it's a challenging environment. I mean, you have to. It's not. We had the other episode which was talking about setting up a fund. It makes really compared to setting up a hedge fund and a venture fund in crypto. Like there's just so many other hoops and service providers and things that you need to be focused on. So yeah, look, I mean, I sympathize with the guys to some extent. They've gotten a lot of criticism over the years. Obviously they're not afraid to be outspoken, but I will say, when you talk to a lot of their portfolio companies, they will say they're perhaps one of the most helpful investors that we have on our cap table. So I still remember the last thing I'll say is I still remember one thing that really stuck with me that Kyle said in a prior Empire episode was he said, when we make an investment, one of the criteria that we ask ourselves is if this guy calls me on a holiday vacation or Friday night or over the weekend, am I gonna pause everything and kind of work with them? And so, yeah, I think it speaks to kind of their MO and philosophy. And so, yeah, anyways, I thought it was a good episode. There's an interesting discussion around kind of their theses. I asked them, hey, what are the kind of major use cases that you envision going forward? Because we are in this state where people are kind of questioning the use cases of crypto. And he brought up obviously AI and crypto. And, of course, a lot of people are going to read into that and say, oh, here we go, But I think he goes through the kind of three use cases around kind of the combination of the two that makes candidly some sense. And I think it's probably worth digging in deeper into future episodes. So yeah, that's kind of my long take. I don't know what you think.
Yeah. No, I liked it. I mean, we asked him some tough questions on FTX.
We did.
I don't think they realized that the big chunk of the first part was going to be focused so much on that. But no, I thought it was a good episode. It's got me thinking about L2s. I mean, like they're, yeah, I mean they're like really. I think it was Tushar who said any L2 with its own token and decentralized governance will eventually vote to become an L1 because token holders are greedy and the market shows that L1s get a significant valuation premium. Also, that L2s are not viable businesses. I think it's just like in a world where L2s are really hot right now. Like everyone's talking about Arbitrum, Optimism, all these kind of ZK rollups and stuff like that. Like it's just nice to. I disagree with Tushar here, but it's good to hear the other point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I've had really interesting intellectual discussions with these guys. I remember pitching them on DeFi, and they reached out, early on, and they had just a belief that it was not going to accrue much value, or DeFi was a thing, but how you invest in it was we kind of disagreed on that. One of the things that they said about L2s, which I think is an interesting kind of discussion to further have. Maybe we can invite Steven from Arbitrum and the OpenSea guys and just them as well and others. Is this idea that an L2 eventually bumps into the same issues of an L1 from an architectural standpoint, particularly around the sequencer and kind of the leadership, kind of round robin methodology, right? Which is that was their argument, and which leads them, of course, to then say,
where they're right. Oh, just go ahead.
yeah, well, which leads them to say Solana is just a fundamentally better architecture, more scalable, and it's just from first principles, like you could see Solana really kind of scaling versus L2s eventually reach this bottleneck that is no different than what you're seeing in L1 context. So that was their take. I don't necessarily agree with that, but you were saying.
I actually do agree with it in a sense. Here's what I think people are missing with L2s is that just decentralizing the sequencer is a freaking it's so much harder than everyone realizes. And I mean, let's take it back to the Shapella conversation. You remember these conversations in 2016 and 2017 where proof of stake was coming next year, and lo and behold, proof of stake came, but it took 4 or 5 years longer than people realized. And I think that will be the L2 version of that, is that decentralizing the sequencer doesn't take 1 year. That's I don't know. We got to have the like Astria or the espresso people on, but like that's a 4 or 5 year thing. I think it's a really hard thing to do that. Um,
Yeah.
so that's I think, the thing that could push people to decentralize the sequencer faster and really prioritize it is not efficiency of the network. It's not any actually product related thing. It's
hmm
probably regulation will force people to decentralize the sequencer faster than they realize they need to.
Yeah. On those 2 points, one, we talked about base to some extent, and I think they were interested in that as much as they are not very particularly bullish on L2s. Pretty much everyone we've talked to at this point is of the mind that Base, which is Coinbase L2 project, is very bullish for the space from an onboarding perspective. So that was point number one. Point number two is I asked him about a fairly controversial take that he's had, which is, and this is Kyle, he tweeted something which is he doesn't care as much, he doesn't prioritize security as much as other things right now. And I asked him that and I said, well, because obviously I fundamentally believe that security is the most important thing. Otherwise, there is no reason why you should be in this space. If we can't get security right, then none of this matters. The immutability properties, the censorship kind of resistance properties. Like, I feel like security is the most important thing. Focusing on security, to your point around why it takes so long to ship infrastructure in crypto, is getting security right is a very hard thing, and not compromising on security, which, by the way, security means a lot of things to different people. But when I think about security is, do you have the properties of like immutability of, that the network's, fundamentally secure? You could look at the Nakamoto consensus, you could look at the validator set, like this idea of like, can the network be attacked? Why? Because when you have value on chain, you want to make sure that it's secure. And when you do transfers, when you're interacting these protocols, that they're secure. It's a lot of things, right? But fundamentally, I think Bitcoin is, when we think about the pecking order, like Bitcoin's the most secure because of the most Lindy effect. It's been around for a while. And then Ethereum, second to that. And then everything else kind of is still in progress, right? We talked about reorgs, which you could argue that there's a process, and it's like sometimes reorgs are blown out of proportion. But I fundamentally, this is just my personal opinion, when I see that, it gives me pause to interact in a network that consistently has reorgs. Not just Solana. You have Polygon, you have others that have this issue. It slowed down. It's a massive restart to the network, and it could cause wreak really a lot of havoc across like DeFi and some other kind of places.
Yeah.
And so Ethereum just doesn't have that. Ethereum used to have that back in the day. People forget. So all I'm trying to say with this take is, look, I think that it's going to be pretty interesting, because if you look over the last 10 years, people are going to say, look, well, Ethereum also had this problem, right, of reorgs, and it took so long to ship. But I think the benefit that Ethereum had was there was not really much competition around at that time, and it really kind of solidified the mindshare with the being kind of the primary funding mechanism with ICOs, and then people just sort of stuck building on Ethereum for better or for worse. Now, of course, you have all these competing kind of L1s, and you're wondering, like, over Tushar and Kaz said, well, over a 5-10 year horizon, people are going to talk about Solana and some of these other networks, and like, Bitcoin has a head start on Ethereum, and it was like a 7-year head start. That gap over time is negligible. It doesn't really matter, right? But I think it's subtle, but I think Ethereum continues to be the dominant mind share. It has continuously kind of shipped. And I believe that perhaps some people are really stuck on this idea that it has been a slow organization. It has been slow to upgrade. The roadmap has been super delayed at times. But I think that this particular upgrade is a new era in the Ethereum development cycle, where you're going to see faster cycles, more precise, and just give greater confidence of, as an investor, as a user, as a developer, you really pay attention to, which is the execution risk, the kind of the infrastructure risk that a network has. And I of course, people may read into this and say I'm biased, right? Most of my projects that I'm an investor on are based in Ethereum, and I think that continues to be the case. Like, developers just have greater certainty, right? That's not to say that Solana's dead, but still, I think that from an infrastructure standpoint, do you agree with partially that, there's still so many things that need to be figured out on the scalability front, and the attention will be on L2s and the sequencer? I think that's going to be a major trend as we think about narratives in this space. I think that will be really front and center because it ties into so many things, as you said, from a technical standpoint, from a scalability standpoint, and fundamentally also from a regulatory standpoint. So that's, I think, probably something that over the next 6 to 12 months is going to be kind of a greater kind of focus point in the industry.
Yeah, I agree. I'm I'm much more bullish on Solana than you are. But I really like Solana. I think this new narrative of like things that are only possible on Solana, like I'm excited by that. I
Oh
think
yeah,
that Solana has this huge advantage of being able to see all the mistakes that Ethereum made and like get ahead of those mistakes, which I mean, I've seen for Blockworks as someone who's like a little later into the media game, seeing the mistakes that a lot of early crypto media players made, like I've seen how valuable that can be
sure.
for a competitor. And so I don't know. I like Solana more than you do. But yeah,
I want to
agree with
be
most of your points there.
open here. I I like Solana for that reason, as you said, because they're not afraid to try new stuff. To me, one of the things that I always point to folks is look at the Solana phone. Fundamentally, that kind of
I got it.
thinking.
I played with it.
Oh, did you? Well, maybe in
Yeah,
next
yeah. We got
episode
one
we
at
can
the.
kind of like. Is there anything to do right now? Or is this like a first version of the smartphone that had slow internet and no app store, or like the app store was like very limited?
Uh, no, I mean, It's basically a Samsung Galaxy with a DApp store complete with a zero fee DApp store completely built in. So there's like, yeah. I mean, imagine a Samsung Galaxy with a bunch of crypto native apps completely built in with like really easy to use things like Marinade and
Hmm.
Orca and Phantom and things on Solana.
Okay.
It's pretty
Yeah.
smooth.
Look, I'm not
Yeah.
like I'm not a maxi. I'm just stating facts here in terms of my allocation historically has been heavily skewed towards Ethereum-based projects. But I've invested in other things like, that I've been public about near Solana, and Solana-based projects. And, I think, uh, I'm not of the mind that everyone's flocking Solana and building elsewhere. Um, and this will be a true test of the resiliency of the Solana community and network. I think, um, you know, I find we've had Anatolian a number of times and Ben as well, who leads BD. And so, it's very difficult to be in their position because I think they get disproportionate amount of shit in the industry, right? Kind of like Coinbase. But, we need these kind of folks to like really push different kind of solutions, right? Because I believe that we're so early from a infrastructure phase still of this asset class that you need to try a lot of other, you know, design choices for the space. Unfortunately, you can't really. What I will disagree with Kyle is you can't move fast and break things, because moving fast and breaking things in crypto is not the same as moving fast and breaking things in Web 2 land. Like it's the pain is much, like the damage is much, more real, I guess, when people lose their funds or protocol gets hacked and whatnot. So that's the only thing that I'm cautious around.
Let's talk about I just want to get your thoughts on Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's over 30K and ETH is over 2K. Bitcoin's up 9% in the last week. ETH is up 8%. Um, yeah, bulls are back on parade. Curious how you're thinking about this. Is this are we coming out? Are we on the other side of the bear here? Are we gonna go touch those? Is Bitcoin gonna hit 20K again? Are we gonna see ETH down in the like 1K range again? Like where are we? How are you feeling about prices right now?
Well, as you know, I mean, there's a lot of noise in prices in the short term. I would argue that we probably bottomed here, and we bottomed for a while now. You know, I, I have noticed that, I started to get really excited about Bitcoin, um, you know, last month. And, and yeah, probabilistically, I probably think we see, so gun in my head, what are we going to see first? 40K Bitcoin or 20K Bitcoin? I think we see 40K. Are we going to see 3K ETH or 1K ETH. I think we see 3K ETH, but like probabilistically, there's higher odds of seeing that. There's obviously a number of things that could derail that, right? And scenarios. Macro is still important, I think, but there's some inflation data that came out yesterday that's not as bad. I don't know. I'm just kind of speculating here for value entertainment purposes, I guess. But look, I feel very. The thing that gives me really conviction is some of the other stuff that we talked about. NFTs being a huge kind of like entry point for people. This upgrade for Ethereum is critical. The development that's happening in the Bitcoin camp around like exploring with an L2 kind of scenario. There was David Marcus, ex Facebook Libra guy, just announced kind of his project, right, around supporting kind of Lightning and payment transfers, and those are the things that get me really fired up about where we're going. If we have another kind of energy crisis or macro blow up or another bank run, sure, that's going to impact this asset class for sure. One of the things that I would want to talk about another episode is who's the incremental buyer, right? Who's coming in? How much of that is just internal rotation? Where is this new kind of pockets of liquidity coming from? Right. And so, yeah, anyways, the general market's also up a lot. So, you're still kind of correlated to that, right? So anyone's best guess, really. What do you think?
Look, inflation's cooling. Pretty tough for the Fed to raise rates much higher. Stocks are up. Central banks just came out. I was reading some Reuters thing. Central banks are buying more gold than they've ever bought at all-time high. Bitcoin's above 30K. ETH is above 2K. NFT NYC right now is bullish. ETH Tokyo coming up. ETH CC coming up in July. ETH withdrawals were successful. Feels pretty tough to be bearish.
I mean, long term for sure. None of this is legal financial advice, but look, let's just for once enjoy the weekend. It's been a huge milestone for Ethereum.
I enjoy my weekends. I don't know what you're talking about.
No. Well, what I'm saying is like, it's been a great week for crypto, I think. And so let's take it all in.
Big win.
For sure. From a long-term perspective, I think this would be one of the key milestones. So anyways, great episode. Not a lot of news, but an important milestone nonetheless. And we'll be here next week, right, sir?
See you guys Tuesday for the Multicoin app.